Starfleet scientists watched in horror as a human ripped apart a Void Titan by hand. Major Hart, contaminated with the creature's own essence, plunged deep into the alien entity's core. Seizing the crystalline nexus with his luminescent arm, he tore it free with raw human strength. The ancient being convulsed in agony as its neural network shattered, marking humanity's terrifying victory over the cosmic horror. The darkness of space stretched endlessly beyond the reinforced viewport of Starfleet Research Station, EOS 9. Major Alex Hart stood motionless, his reflection superimposed against the void, creating the illusion that he was suspended in nothingness. His weathered face, marked by years of military service, showed little emotion as he observed the faint light from distant white dwarf stars, barely penetrating the station's location at the edge of the Delta Quadra's void zone. Beautiful in its emptiness, isn't it? The voice behind him belonged to Dr. Lena Voss, chief researcher of EOS 9's Xenobiology Division. She approached with quiet confidence, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun that emphasized her sharp features. Hart didn't turn. Emptiness is rarely empty, Doctor. That's why we're here. The year was 2487, and humanity had spread across 3 galaxies, encountering wonders and horrors beyond imagination. Yet the void zones remained largely unexplored, regions where conventional physics broke down, where matter and energy behaved according to rules that defied standard understanding. Starfleet had established EOS 9 as their premier research facility for studying void organisms, creatures that somehow thrived in these impossible spaces. "Your transfer paperwork came through," Voss said, handing him a transparent tablet. "Command was quite insistent on having you specifically. Your background in battlefield xenobiology is apparently invaluable to our research." Hart finally turned from the viewport, taking the tablet with a calloused hand. His eyes, gray and cold as lunar dust, scanned the information without any change in expression. "They didn't send me here for my scientific expertise." "Dr. Voss." "No," she raised an eyebrow. "They sent me because I know how these things die." Hart's voice carried no pride in this statement, only the weight of experience. 15 years on the front lines of the Centauri expansion. I've cut open more void-influenced creatures than most people have seen stars. Voss's expression hardened slightly. "This is a research station. Major. We study. We don't exterminate." "Until something goes wrong," Hart replied, handing back the tablet. "Then they need people like me." Their conversation was interrupted by the station's communication system. "Dr. Voss, Major Hart, your presence is requested in Conference Room Alpha immediately." The artificial voice was calm, betraying nothing of the urgency that would soon transform the station. The conference room was already filled with senior staff when they arrived. The holographic display in the center of the table showed a massive shape, something that defied easy classification between machine and organism. Approximately 200 meters in length, its surface was covered in what appeared to be both metallic plating and organic tissue, with various appendages and structures jutting out at impossible angles. Station Commander Eliza Morgan, a stern woman with decades of Starfleet experience, gestured to the hologram. The Planetary Alliance exploration vessel, Horizon, discovered this drifting near the outer boundary of Void Zone Delta 7. Initial scans classified it as a derelict, possibly a previously unknown species vessel. "That's no vessel," Hart said immediately, leaning forward to study the projection. "That's a Void Titan." The room fell silent. Void Titans were semi-mythical entities, reported by early explorers, but rarely documented with credible evidence. They were said to be ancient beings that navigated between dimensions, sometimes leaving devastation in their wake when they intersected with normal space. "The Horizon reported unusual energy signatures," Commander Morgan continued. "They attempted to collect samples but were forced to retreat when their systems began malfunctioning. Before withdrawing, They managed to attach a beacon and requested Starfleet scientific intervention. Dr. Voss circled the hologram, her scientific curiosity evident. If this truly is a Titan, it would be the first one ever documented up close. The research potential is extraordinary. It appears to be dead or dormant, added Ensign Raj Patel, the station's systems biology engineer. Young and brilliant, Patel had 3 doctorates before turning 30. But some cellular structures are still showing minimal activity, like a biological computer in low-power mode. Hart's expression darkened. That's what makes them dangerous. Void entities don't die like conventional organisms. They can remain dormant for centuries, then reactivate when exposed to certain stimuli. Which is precisely why we need to study it, Voss countered. Imagine the technological applications. Cellular structures that can survive in the void? Self-repairing systems that can remain dormant indefinitely? Commander Morgan raised a hand to silence the brewing debate. Starfleet Command has already made its decision. We are to dispatch a team to secure samples and conduct preliminary analysis. Major Hart will lead the expedition, with Dr. Voss providing scientific direction. Hart looked surprised. I've been here less than 24 hours, Commander. And you have more experience with void entities than anyone else on this station, Morgan replied firmly. Your expertise in field xenobiology and combat experience make you uniquely qualified. Who else will be on the team? Voss asked. Ensign Patel for systems analysis, Medical Officer Julia Torres, and Security Officer Omar Reza, with a squad of 4 security personnel. Morgan's tone made it clear this wasn't open for discussion. You depart in 6 hours. I suggest you prepare thoroughly. As the meeting dispersed, Hart caught up with Voss in the corridor. You seem eager to poke at something that could annihilate this entire station. Voss stopped walking. And you seem to forget that exploration and discovery are Starfleet's primary missions. Not everything is a threat to be neutralized. Major. I've seen what comes out of the void, Doctor. The Centauri colonies weren't destroyed by harmless scientific curiosities. This Titan is dormant, possibly dead. Nothing from the void is ever truly dead. Hart's voice carried the weight of memories he clearly preferred not to revisit. Just waiting. The shuttle bay was a flurry of activity as the team prepared for departure. The expedition vessel, Prometheus, was being loaded with scientific equipment and security gear. Hart inspected the weapons cache personally, checking each particle disruptor and containment field generator. Security Officer Omar Reza approached, his imposing physical presence softened somewhat by thoughtful eyes. Expecting trouble, Major. Hart secured the weapons locker. Always expect trouble when dealing with the unknown, Officer Reza, especially when the unknown comes from the void. Reza nodded. My team's ready. All ex-military, combat trained. Though I admit, none of us have faced anything like a Titan before. No one has, Hart replied grimly. Just remember, if something feels wrong, don't hesitate. Shoot first. Collect samples later. Dr. Voss might disagree with that approach. Dr. Voss isn't responsible for keeping everyone alive. We are. Across the bay, Voss was supervising the loading of sensitive scientific equipment with Patel and Torres. Medical Officer Julia Torres was methodically organizing her medical supplies, her movements precise and economical. At 45, she was the oldest member of the team besides Hart, with experience treating xenobiological contamination that made her invaluable for such missions. Major, she acknowledged as Hart approached her station. I've prepared specialized decontamination protocols based on your reports from the Centauri front. I hope we won't need them. Hope for the best. Prepare for the worst. Dr. Torres. Hart examined her equipment. Any experience with void-influenced tissue? Theoretical only, she admitted. But I've studied every available case file, including yours. Hart nodded, then turned to Patel, who was calibrating a series of complex scanners. Those won't work if the Titan has an active defense field. Patel looked up, his youthful enthusiasm undimmed by Hart's pessimism. I've modified them to operate on multiple phase variances. If conventional scanning fails, we can shift to quantum state analysis. Clever, Hart conceded. But keep a manual backup for everything. Void entities have a way of disrupting even the most sophisticated technology. All systems are redundant, Major, Patel assured him with a confidence that only youth could provide. And I've developed new shielding algorithms specifically designed to resist void energy interference. Hart almost smiled. Let's hope they work better than the ones on the Centauri colonies. Commander Morgan's voice came over the station's communication system. Expedition team, prepare for final briefing before departure. The team gathered in the shuttle bay's briefing area as Morgan activated a holographic display showing the Titan's location relative to EOS 9. The entity remains stationary at coordinates 227 to 84109, approximately 4 hours from the station at standard speed. Your mission objectives are clear. Approach cautiously, perform external scans, and if deemed safe, collect samples for analysis. Under no circumstances are you to attempt full integration with the entity's systems. She looked directly at Hart. Major, you have full authority to abort the mission if you determine the risk level is unacceptable. The safety of this team takes priority over scientific discovery. Hart nodded, aware of Voss's slight frown at the statement. Communications may be unreliable once you enter the boundary zone, Morgan continued. Maintain standard protocol. Check-ins every 30 minutes. If we lose contact for more than 2 hours, we'll dispatch a rescue team. A rescue team would face the same communication issues, Hart pointed out. And if something goes wrong with us, they'd be walking into the same trap. Morgan's expression remained impassive. Those are Starfleet protocols. Major, we don't abandon our people. We also don't throw good lives after bad, Hart countered, but didn't press the issue further. One final note, Morgan said, addressing the entire team. This discovery has been classified Level Alpha. No communications about it outside this station. The Planetary Alliance is already demanding access. But Starfleet wants first analysis before diplomatic complications arise. The unspoken implication was clear. Whatever they found could have significant military applications. And Starfleet wanted that advantage secured before sharing. Departure in 30 minutes. Dismissed. As the team made final preparations, Hart found himself alone in the shuttle bay's observation area. The vastness of space beyond the force field reminded him of other missions, other teams. Not all had returned. Having second thoughts? Voss's voice broke his reverie. Just remembering, he replied. The void doesn't forgive mistakes. This is a scientific expedition, not a military operation. Hart turned to face her. Those distinctions disappear quickly when things go wrong. Doctor, I've led teams like this before, civilians and soldiers, all excited about making history. Not all of them made it back to tell their stories. Voss studied him for a moment. Your service record is impressive, but also concerning. 3 expeditions with high casualty rates. Some might see a pattern. The pattern is that I was sent into impossible situations and managed to bring anyone back at all. Hart's voice remained level, but there was an edge to it. Void entities don't care about your research goals or ethical boundaries. They react to threats according to their nature, and their nature is alien beyond your comprehension. Then help us understand them better, Voss challenged. This isn't about weapons or defense systems. Knowledge itself has value. Knowledge has consequences, Hart countered. But we're going anyway. So let's focus on keeping everyone alive first. We can debate philosophy after we return. The Prometheus departed precisely on schedule. Its sleek form, designed for both scientific exploration and rapid evasion if necessary. The journey to the Titan's location was conducted largely in silence, each team member absorbed in their preparations. Hart spent the time reviewing what little was known about Void Titans, mostly unconfirmed reports and theoretical analyses. According to legend, they were ancient beings that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions beyond human comprehension. Their biology, if it could be called that, combined organic components with structures that resembled advanced technology, though whether they were constructed or evolved remained unknown. 4 hours later, Ensign Patel broke the silence. "We're approaching the coordinates. Initial scans are detecting the beacon placed by the horizon." Hart moved to the forward viewport as the ship's illumination systems activated, revealing the massive form of the Titan against the backdrop of absolute darkness. Even dormant, it inspired awe and dread. Its surface was a complex landscape of what appeared to be metallic plates, interspersed with tissue-like membranes. Various appendages extended outward, like the limbs of some cosmic arthropod, frozen in place. Portions of its hull glimmered with faint bioluminescence despite its apparently dormant state. "Magnificent," Voss whispered, joining Hart at the viewport. "Look at the integration of organic and inorganic components. The evolutionary implications are staggering." "If it evolved at all," Hart said quietly. "Some theorize they were engineered by something even older." Patel's voice interrupted their contemplation. "I'm detecting minimal energy readings consistent with biological activity. It appears to be in a state similar to cryptobiosis, suspended animation." "Life signs?" Hart asked sharply. "Nothing that our systems would classify as alive by conventional standards," Patel replied. "But there are processes occurring at a quantum level that don't match any known natural phenomenon." Hart turned to Security Officer Reza. "Establish a defensive perimeter once we're aboard. No one goes anywhere alone. And I want constant scanning for energy fluctuations." "Aboard?" Voss questioned. "The mission parameters were to collect external samples first." "External samples won't tell us much about its internal systems," Hart replied. "And those are what Starfleet is really interested in. We'll proceed carefully, but we need to go inside." Voss looked as though she might argue further, but instead nodded reluctantly. "We'll follow your security protocols." The Prometheus maneuvered carefully alongside the massive entity, eventually identifying what appeared to be a breach in the outer hull, possibly damage from whatever had left the Titan in this state. "That opening is large enough for our shuttle," Patel observed. "Scans show a chamber beyond that could accommodate us." "Could be a mouth," Hart muttered, but directed the pilot to proceed. "Approach slowly. Be prepared to reverse thrust at the first sign of movement." The shuttle eased through the jagged opening, illuminating an cavernous interior space. The walls pulsed with faint bioluminescence, revealing ribbed structures that resembled both organic tissue and mechanical components. "It's like being inside a living machine," Torres observed, checking her medical scanner. "The air composition is unusual, but not immediately toxic. High concentrations of unknown particles, though. Full environmental suits regardless," Hart ordered as the shuttle settled onto what appeared to be a solid surface. "Helmets remain sealed until I give the order otherwise." The team prepared methodically, checking each other's environmental suits and equipment. Hart led the way as the shuttle's airlock opened, stepping cautiously onto the surface of the Titan's interior. The material beneath their boots had the consistency of cartilage, firm, yet slightly yielding. The chamber extended far beyond the reach of their lights, with various tubular structures branching off like massive veins or conduits. "Preliminary scans indicate minimal biological activity," Patel reported, consulting his modified scanner. "But there's something unusual about the quantum signature. It's fluctuating in patterns that suggest some form of information processing." "A dormant consciousness?" Voss suggested, already collecting samples from the nearest wall. "Or automated defense systems," Hart countered. "Proceed with caution. Reza, establish a perimeter. Torres, monitor for any biological contaminants. Patel, I want continuous scans for energy fluctuations." The team spread out within the chamber, each focused on their assigned tasks. Hart moved methodically, his experienced eyes noting details that others might miss. The way certain structures pulsed with marginally more intensity when approached. How the bioluminescence seemed to track their movements. "Major," Voss called from several meters away. "You should see this." Hart approached carefully, finding Voss examining what appeared to be a cluster of crystalline structures embedded in the wall. Unlike the surrounding tissue, these crystals emitted a steady blue light. "Some form of power source?" Hart suggested. "Or a neural cluster," Voss replied, her scanner hovering inches from the formation. "The energy patterns are incredibly complex, almost like encrypted data streams." "Don't touch it," Hart warned, but Voss was already extracting a small sample with specialized tools. As the crystal fragment separated from the wall, a tremor ran through the entire chamber. The bioluminescence intensified momentarily, then returned to its previous state. "What was that?" Reza called from his position. "Possibly a defensive reaction," Hart replied, his hand moving instinctively to his weapon. Dr. Voss just removed a sample from what might be a critical system. "The reaction was minor," Voss defended, securing the crystal in a containment field. "And this sample could be the key to understanding the Titan's entire operating system." Hart was about to respond when Patel's urgent voice came through the communication system. "Major, I'm detecting a significant increase in energy readings throughout the structure. Something's happening." As if in response to Patel's warning, the bioluminescence throughout the chamber began to pulse in coordinated patterns. The floor beneath them vibrated slightly, and distant sounds, like massive machinery activating, echoed through the structure. "Everyone back to the shuttle, now," Hart ordered. "Secure all samples and equipment. Move." The team began a swift but orderly retreat, but had only covered half the distance to the shuttle when the true nature of the situation became apparent. The opening through which they had entered was slowly contracting, the edges of the breach drawing together like a wound healing. "It's sealing us in," Reza observed, his voice remarkably calm despite the implication. Hart made a quick calculation. "We can still make it. Double time." They increased their pace, but the opening continued to shrink rapidly. As they reached the shuttle, Hart realized the breach was now barely wide enough for the vessel to pass through. "Everyone aboard!" he shouted. "Pilot, prepare for immediate departure." The team scrambled into the shuttle as the pilot initiated launch procedures. The engines hummed to life, but as the shuttle began to lift, tendrils of tissue-like material suddenly extended from the walls, wrapping around the vessel's hull. "We're being restrained," the pilot reported, increasing power to the engines. "Breaking free, but the exit is almost closed." Hart made a split-second decision. "Full power! Ram through if necessary!" The shuttle surged forward, straining against the biological restraints. Several tendrils snapped under the pressure, releasing viscous fluid that glowed with the same bioluminescence as the walls. The shuttle scraped through the narrowing breach, tearing away fragments of the Titan's hull in the process. As they emerged into open space, the external cameras showed the breach rapidly sealing behind them, the Titan's self-repair systems erasing their point of entry. "Return to the Prometheus," Hart ordered. "We're aborting the mission." "Abort?" Voss objected immediately. "We've barely begun sample collection. The Titan is reactivating. This is precisely when we should be studying it." "It's reactivating because we disturbed it," Hart countered. "And an active Titan is beyond our capability to handle safely. We take what we've learned back to EOS 9. "Major Hart is correct," Torres interjected, examining readings from her medical scanner. "The biological activity is increasing exponentially. If this continues, we could be dealing with a fully awakened entity within hours." Voss looked frustrated, but didn't argue further as the shuttle docked with the Prometheus. Once aboard the larger vessel, Hart immediately contacted EOS 9. "Commander Morgan, this is Major Hart. The Titan is showing signs of reactivation following our sample collection. Recommend immediate withdrawal to safe distance and preparation of containment protocols. Morgan's response came through with significant interference. Understood. Major. Return to base immediately. We'll prepare. Containment. Defense systems. The transmission deteriorated into static. The Titan is generating some kind of interference field, Patel reported. It's affecting all communications and beginning to impact our navigational systems as well. Hart's expression hardened. Get us out of here, maximum speed. The Prometheus accelerated away from the massive entity, but alarms began sounding throughout the ship almost immediately. Energy surge from the Titan, Patel shouted. It's... Before he could finish, a pulse of iridescent energy erupted from the Titan, washing over the Prometheus like a wave. Systems failed across the ship, plunging them momentarily into darkness before emergency power activated. Damage report, Hart demanded. Main engines offline. Life support at 60%. Weapon systems non-responsive, the pilot reported tersely. We're adrift. Hart moved to the viewport. The Titan was now visibly active, its previously dormant appendages moving with deliberate purpose. The bioluminescence had intensified dramatically, pulsing in complex patterns across its massive form. It's fully awake, Voss whispered, a mixture of scientific awe and fear in her voice. And we're its first meal in who knows how long, Hart added grimly. Patel, can you restore propulsion? The young ensign was already buried in an access panel. Rerouting systems. Working on it, Major. The Titan's energy pulse reconfigured our quantum matrices. I'm attempting to reset them manually. How long? 20 minutes, minimum. Hart calculated their odds silently. The Titan was already moving toward them, its massive form approaching with surprising speed for something of its size. We don't have 20 minutes, he stated flatly. Reza, prepare boarding teams. We're going back. The statement was met with stunned silence. Back? To the Titan? Torres asked incredulously. Its defensive pulse was targeted at our ship, not our environmental suits. Hart explained rapidly. If we can reach a critical system inside the Titan and disable it, we might buy enough time for repairs. That's insane, Voss objected. We have no map of its interior, no understanding of its critical systems, and no way to identify what would actually disable it. Actually, Patel interrupted, the samples we collected might help with that. The crystalline structures Dr. Voss retrieved show patterns consistent with centralized processing nodes. If they form a network throughout the Titan, disrupting enough of them might impair its functions. Hart nodded. Exactly. A targeted strike, in and out. Volunteer team only. I won't order anyone into this. I'll go, Reza said immediately. And my security team will follow. You'll need me to identify the nodes, Voss added reluctantly. And I should come to analyze biological responses, Torres volunteered. Hart looked at each of them, then nodded. Patel stays here to complete repairs. The rest of us deploy in 5 minutes. Heavy weapons. Maximum charges. As they prepared in the shuttle bay, Hart pulled Reza aside. If things go wrong in there, your priority is getting the civilians out. I'll handle the rest. Reza studied him for a moment. You're planning something you're not telling us. Just a contingency, Hart replied. Let's hope we don't need it. The team boarded a smaller emergency shuttle equipped with reinforced hull plating. As they launched toward the approaching Titan, Hart outlined the plan. We'll use the same entry point if possible. If not, we create one. Once inside, we move directly to the largest concentration of processing nodes we can find and plant explosive charges calibrated to disrupt their quantum structure. And if we encounter resistance, one of Reza's security officers asked. Avoid engagement if possible, Hart replied. If forced to defend yourselves, aim for what appear to be sensory organs or neural pathways. Avoid fluid-carrying vessels. Void entity fluids are often toxic or caustic. The shuttle approached the Titan, which had now grown to fill their entire field of view. Its surface writhed with activity, plates shifting and realigning as it continued its transformation from dormant to fully active. "The original breach has sealed completely," the pilot reported, scanning for structural weaknesses. After tense moments, the pilot identified a thinner section of the outer hull. The shuttle's weapons, designed for precision rather than raw power, carved a new opening just large enough for them to enter. As before, they found themselves in a vast chamber, but the environment had transformed dramatically. What had been dim bioluminescence was now brilliant pulsing light. The previously static structures undulated with life, and the air itself seemed charged with energy. "The atmospheric composition has changed," Torres reported, checking her instruments. "Increased levels of exotic particles. Environmental suits will filter them, but limit exposure time." Hart led them deeper into the Titan, following Patel's remote guidance toward what scans suggested was a concentration of the crystalline nodes. The interior had become a maze of shifting passages, forcing them to adapt their route constantly. "It's reorganizing its internal structure," Voss observed. "Remarkable adaptive capability. Less admiration, more focus on the mission," Hart reminded her sharply. They had progressed perhaps 500 meters when they encountered the first direct resistance. A section of wall suddenly extruded multiple tentacle-like appendages that lashed toward them with alarming speed. "Down!" Hart shouted, firing his particle disruptor at the base of the largest appendage. The security team responded with disciplined precision, creating a perimeter around the civilians while targeting the attacking structures. Their weapons proved effective, severing several appendages which fell to the floor, leaking luminescent fluid. But the Titan responded by increasing the number of attacking limbs, forcing the team backward down the corridor they had been traversing. "This route is compromised," Reza reported calmly, despite the intensity of the confrontation. "Alternative." Patel's voice came through their communications. "There's another pathway approximately 20 meters to your right. It might lead to the same destination." Hart made a quick decision. "Fall back to the intersection, then right fork, covering fire." The team executed the maneuver smoothly, retreating in formation while maintaining suppressive fire against the advancing appendages. As they reached the new pathway, Hart noticed something disturbing. The severed appendages were being reabsorbed into the floor, their materials reclaimed by the Titan. "It's learning from each engagement," he warned, "and it's recycling damaged components. We need to move faster." The new pathway led them deeper into the Titan, the environment becoming increasingly alien. Gravity fluctuated subtly, and occasional pulses of energy ran through the surrounding structures like heartbeats. "We're approaching a major node cluster," Voss reported, consulting her scanner. "Approximately 50 meters ahead." As they reached the end of the corridor, it opened into a vast spherical chamber, unlike anything they had encountered previously. The walls were entirely covered in the crystalline structures they had sampled earlier, creating a cathedral-like space that pulsed with blue-white light. In the center of the chamber hung what appeared to be a dense cluster of crystals, arranged in a geometric pattern that shifted continuously. "That's it," Voss whispered, her scientific detachment momentarily overcome by wonder. "Some kind of central processing hub." Hart was more pragmatic. "Set charges around the perimeter. Focus on support structures and major connection points." The team spread out, moving carefully around the chamber's edge. Torres examined the crystalline walls with her scanner, selecting optimal placement points for the explosive devices. Reza's security team maintained vigilance, weapons ready. They had placed perhaps half the charges when Hart noticed a change in the chamber's lighting. The pulsing had become more rapid, more intense, and now seemed to follow their movements directly. "It knows what we're doing," he realized aloud. "Everyone move faster. We may have less time than we thought." As if in response to his warning, the entrance to the chamber began to contract, the opening shrinking rapidly. "Finish placing the charges," Hart ordered. "Reza, get your team to the exit and keep it open." Reza, and two security officers rushed to the contracting doorway, using their weapons to damage the tissue, attempting to seal it. The opening slowed its closure, but continued to shrink. "Charges set," Torres reported. "Detonation sequence programmed." "Everyone out! Now!" Hart commanded. "Back to the shuttle!" The team converged on the doorway, which was now barely wide enough for a single person to pass through. Voss went first, followed by Torres and the remaining security officer. As Reza prepared to follow, the floor beneath him suddenly liquefied, pulling him downward. "Reza!" Hart lunged forward, grabbing the security officer's arm as he sank to his waist in the suddenly gelatinous floor. "Get out, Major," Reza said grimly, already drawing his sidearm with his free hand. "I'll buy you time." Before Hart could respond, a massive tendril erupted from the wall behind them, sweeping across the chamber and striking one of the security officers who had been holding the door. The impact threw the man across the chamber, his environmental suit rupturing on impact with the crystalline wall. Hart made a split-second decision. "Torres, get everyone back to the shuttle. I'll get Reza and follow." He didn't wait for acknowledgement, already firing his disruptor at the substance engulfing Reza, trying to break its cohesion. The floor material recoiled from the energy discharge, allowing Hart to pull Reza partially free. "More incoming!" Reza warned, firing at multiple tendrils now emerging from various points around the chamber. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. The injured security officer was being enveloped by the wall where he had landed, the material flowing over his struggling form despite his teammates' attempts to free him with weapons fire. Hart reached for his final option, a compact quantum charge designed for clearing void-infused barriers. Far more powerful than the standard explosives they had planted, it could potentially destabilize the entire chamber. "Change of plans," he told Reza, pressing the device into the security officer's hand. "Get to the shuttle. I'll create a diversion." "Major!" "That's an order," Hart cut him off. "Someone needs to lead them out." Reluctantly, Reza took the device and began making his way toward the exit, which was now barely large enough to squeeze through. Hart turned his attention to the center of the chamber, where the crystalline core continued its shifting patterns, now moving with increased speed. He fired directly into it, his weapon's energy causing visible disruption in the pattern. The effect was immediate. The entire chamber shuddered, and the tendrils attacking the team suddenly withdrew, reorienting toward Hart. "Go, now!" Hart shouted to the remaining team members, who seized the opportunity to drag their injured comrade toward the exit. Hart continued firing at the central crystal cluster, causing increasingly violent reactions throughout the chamber. The walls pulsed erratically, and the floor beneath him began to undulate. He backed toward the exit, maintaining continuous fire until he saw the last team member squeeze through the opening. Only then did he turn to follow, but found the opening had contracted to barely the width of his shoulders. He forced himself into the gap, the material of the doorway pressing against his environmental suit with increasing pressure. Halfway through, he felt the suit's integrity field fluctuate as the pressure intensified. Warning indicators flashed across his helmet display. Suit breach imminent. With a final effort, he pushed through, tearing his suit in the process and feeling the alien atmosphere make direct contact with his exposed skin. The sensation was like ice and fire simultaneously, sending pain lancing through his nervous system. He staggered forward, vision blurring, aware that Torres was shouting something about contamination and Reza was supporting his weight. "The charges," he managed to say through gritted teeth. "Detonate now." Reza activated the detonator as they continued their retreat through the shifting corridors of the Titan. Behind them, a series of explosions shook the entire structure, sending shockwaves through the living passages. "It's working," Voss reported, checking her scanner as they ran. "The node network is destabilizing. The Titan systems are going haywire." Their progress back to the entry point was chaotic, navigating corridors that were now contracting, expanding, or reshaping themselves as the Titan's control systems failed. Twice, they were forced to blast new pathways when their original route sealed itself. When they finally reached the breach where their shuttle waited, they found it partially closed, the opening now barely large enough for the small vessel to exit. "Everyone aboard!" Hart ordered, his voice strained. The exposed area of his skin had begun to display an alarming reaction, the flesh taking on a faint luminescence similar to the Titan's internal structures. Torres noticed immediately. "You need immediate medical attention, Major. That exposure is causing cellular changes." "Get us out of here first," Hart replied, collapsing into a seat as the shuttle powered up. The pilot navigated carefully through the contracting breach, the shuttle's hull scraping against the edges with a sound like tearing metal. As they emerged into open space, they could see the full effect of their sabotage on the Titan. Its massive form was contorting, appendages thrashing in what appeared to be uncoordinated spasms. Pulses of energy rippled across its surface, and portions of its hull were rupturing, releasing clouds of luminescent particles into the void. "Back to the Prometheus," Hart instructed, fighting to remain conscious as the pain from his exposure intensified. When they docked with the main vessel, they found Patel had succeeded in restoring partial power. "Engines at 40% capacity," he reported. "Enough to get us back to EOS 9, but not quickly." "It'll have to do," Hart said. "Maximum distance from the Titan. Now." As the Prometheus limped away, Hart allowed Torres to examine his injury in the medical bay. The exposed skin on his arm had developed a crystalline sheen, and scans showed alarming changes at the cellular level. "The Titan's tissue is attempting to integrate with yours," Torres explained, her professional demeanor masking her concern. "It's rewriting your cellular structure at a quantum level." Hart watched dispassionately as the luminescent pattern slowly spread up his arm. "Can you stop it?" Torres administered a series of treatments, but the progression merely slowed rather than halted. "I can contain it temporarily, but we need the advanced facilities at EOS 9 to properly address this contamination." Voss entered the medical bay, her expression troubled. "The Titan is still active, but its movements have become erratic. Our sabotage disrupted its coordination, but didn't neutralize it." "Then we bought time, nothing more," Hart concluded grimly. "How long until we reach EOS 9? "At current speed, 7 hours, Voss replied. "Patel is trying to squeeze more power from the engines. But—" She trailed off as the ship suddenly shuddered violently. "What was that?" Hart demanded, struggling to his feet despite Torres's objections. The answer came via shipwide communication. "All personnel, brace for impact. The Titan has launched projectiles of some kind." Hart staggered to the bridge, arriving in time to see multiple organic projectiles impacting the Prometheus hull. Each impact caused systems to fluctuate, and external cameras showed the objects beginning to burrow into the ship's outer plating. "It's trying to board us," Hart realized. "Defensive protocols, all sections." The situation deteriorated rapidly. Despite the crew's efforts, several of the organic projectiles breached the hull, extending tendrils into the ship's interior that began interfering with critical systems. Life support started failing in multiple sections, and the engine output dropped precipitously. "We're losing the ship," the pilot reported grimly. "At this rate, complete system failure in under 30 minutes. Hart made a decision. "Abandon ship protocol. Everyone to the emergency shuttles. Prepare for immediate evacuation to EOS 9. As the crew rushed to comply, Hart pulled Voss aside. "Take the samples and data. Get them back to Starfleet." "What about you?" she asked, noting the spreading contamination on his arm. "I'm staying behind," he stated flatly. "Someone needs to make sure the Titan doesn't follow." "That's suicide, Major." "It's necessity," he corrected. "That thing is adapting to our weapons, our tactics. If it reaches EOS 9, no one survives." Voss started to object further, but the ship lurched again, more violently this time. "Go, Doctor. That's an order." Reluctantly, she joined the evacuation, taking charge of the scientific materials they had collected. Hart watched the shuttles depart, then returned to the bridge, where Reza waited. "You should have gone with them," Hart told him. "And leave you to have all the fun?" Reza replied with grim humor. "Not a chance, Major." Together, they assessed their situation. The Titan had ceased firing projectiles now that the shuttles had departed, but it was closing on the disabled Prometheus with apparent purpose. "It wants the ship intact," Hart observed. "Probably to assimilate our technology." "So what's the play?" Reza asked. Hart studied the tactical display, noting the Titan's approach vector. "We rig the quantum drive to overload, then use the last functional shuttle to escape the blast radius." "That might not be enough to destroy something that size," Reza pointed out. "No," Hart agreed, looking down at his contaminated arm, which now glowed with increasing intensity. "But I have an idea about that too." The next hour was spent in frantic preparation, while Reza modified the quantum drive's containment fields to create a catastrophic failure sequence. Hart accessed the ship's research database, reviewing everything known about void entities and their biological weaknesses. What he found confirmed his suspicions. The crystalline structures they had targeted weren't just processing nodes. They were part of a distributed nervous system. And his contamination wasn't just cellular corruption. It was establishing a connection to that system. By the time the Titan had reached the Prometheus, extending massive tendrils to envelop the disabled vessel, their preparations were complete. "Drive overload sequence programmed," Reza reported. 15-minute countdown, non-reversible. "Good," Hart replied, examining his arm, which now displayed complex patterns identical to those they had observed in the Titan's core. "Get to the shuttle. I'll join you shortly." Reza hesitated. "Whatever you're planning with that." He nodded toward Hart's contaminated arm. "It's not worth sacrificing yourself." "Not planning on sacrificing anything," Hart assured him. "Just want to leave our friend a parting gift. Go." "That's an order." Once alone on the bridge, Hart accessed the ship's medical database one final time, confirming what he needed to know about the quantum resonance patterns in his contaminated tissue. Then, he made his way to the airlock nearest the Titan's largest connecting tendril. The containment field, separating him from the vacuum of space, also separated him from the Titan's probing appendage. Through the transparent barrier, he could see the massive tendril pulsing with the same luminescence that now covered most of his left arm. Hart activated the environmental suit he had donned, minus the left sleeve, where his contaminated arm remained exposed. Then he did something that contradicted every safety protocol in Starfleet. He deliberately deactivated the airlock's safety interlocks and opened both inner and outer doors simultaneously. The explosive decompression hurled him toward the Titan's tendril, which reacted instantly, enveloping him in its tissue, instead of fighting it. Hart allowed himself to be drawn into the appendage, feeling it enclose around him completely. Inside the Titan once more, he felt its consciousness brush against his mind through the contaminated connection. It was vast, alien, and hungry after eons of dormancy. It perceived him as both food and information source, a specimen to be broken down and analyzed. But Hart had come prepared. From his suit, he withdrew a hypodermic injector containing a compound synthesized from the ship's medical supplies, a quantum destabilizer designed to disrupt the very patterns now linking him to the Titan. As tendrils of living tissue began to penetrate his suit, seeking greater connection, Hart injected the compound directly into his contaminated arm. The effect was immediate and agonizing, like acid flowing through his veins. But it created the reaction he had anticipated. His contaminated tissue began to emit energy on a frequency that disrupted the Titan's own biological processes. It was like introducing a virus into its system, a virus calibrated to its exact quantum signature, thanks to the tissue sample now part of Hart's own body. The Titan reacted violently, internal structures contracting around him as it tried to isolate the disruption. Hart fought through the pain, forcing himself deeper into the creature's body, heading toward what he hoped was a critical junction of its distributed nervous system. Time was running out. The quantum drive overload would initiate in minutes, and he needed to ensure the Titan couldn't disengage from the ship before detonation. More importantly, he needed to damage its systems enough that the explosion would finish what they had started. He reached what appeared to be a nexus of crystalline structures, similar to the central chamber they had attacked earlier. His contaminated arm now glowed with blinding intensity, the disruption spreading through the surrounding Titan tissue wherever he made contact. Hart realized what he needed to do. The quantum destabilizer was working, but too slowly to affect the entire massive entity. He needed to amplify its effect, to turn his contaminated arm into a weapon that could damage the Titan's core systems directly. With grim determination, he reached for the central crystalline formation with his contaminated hand. The moment he made contact, agony beyond description flooded his consciousness. It felt as though every cell in his body was being torn apart and reassembled simultaneously. But he maintained his grip, feeling the crystalline structure begin to fracture under his hand. The Titan's consciousness recoiled in what could only be described as pain. Its awareness suddenly focused entirely on the human causing this unprecedented disruption. Hart's vision began to blur, the pain threatening to overwhelm him. But he maintained his grip, applying more pressure to the deteriorating crystal structure. Cracks spread outward from his hand, the destabilizing effect propagating through the Titan's neural network. With a final surge of effort, Hart closed his fist around a central crystal node and pulled with all his remaining strength. The structure gave way, with a sound like shattering glass, amplified 1,000-fold, releasing a pulse of energy that knocked him backward. Systems throughout the Titan began to fail catastrophically. Light patterns became erratic, structural integrity collapsed in multiple sections, and the creature's massive form began to convulse uncontrollably. Hart, barely conscious, was vaguely aware of being expelled from the Titan's interior as it attempted to reject the source of contamination. He found himself floating in space, his suit damaged but still providing minimal life support. Through his fading vision, he saw the last shuttle from the Prometheus approaching rapidly, Reza visible through the viewport, maneuvering to retrieve him. Beyond, the Titan's massive form continued its violent contortions, now unable to detach from the doomed research vessel. As Reza's shuttle scooped him from the void, the quantum drive detonation sequence reached zero. The Prometheus exploded in a sphere of blue-white energy that expanded outward, engulfing the Titan completely. The shuttle raced away at maximum speed, the shockwave barely missing them as Reza pushed the engines beyond safety limits. Through the rear viewport, Hart could see the Titan disintegrating, its massive form coming apart as the quantum detonation disrupted the very fabric of its being. "Did we get it?" he managed to ask, as Torres administered emergency treatment in the shuttle's small medical area. "Completely destroyed," Reza confirmed from the pilot's seat. "Whatever you did in there, it worked. The explosion finished it off." Hart nodded weakly, looking down at his arm. The contamination was fading, the luminescence diminishing as the quantum destabilizer completed its work. The connection to the Titan had been severed by its destruction, allowing his own cells to begin rejecting the alien influence. "Heading to EOS 9, Reza reported. ETA 3 hours. Hart closed his eyes, exhaustion overwhelming him. "Tell them, prepare containment protocols for the samples, and full decontamination for all personnel." "Already done," Torres assured him. "Rest now. Major, you've earned it." The return to EOS 9 was met with both celebration and concern. The station had been placed on high alert following the Prometheus distress call, and Commander Morgan herself was waiting in the shuttle bay when they arrived. Hart was immediately transferred to medical isolation, where advanced treatments were begun to purge the remaining Titan contamination from his system. The process was lengthy and painful, but ultimately successful, though it left him with a network of faint luminescent scars tracing up his left arm. 3 days later, he was deemed stable enough to attend the mission debriefing. The conference room was solemn as he entered, the surviving team members rising respectfully. 7 personnel had been lost, 5 security officers and 2 engineers who had remained aboard the Prometheus too long during the evacuation. Commander Morgan began the proceedings. This expedition has been classified Level Omega by Starfleet Command. Nothing discussed here leaves this room. She activated a holographic display showing the remnants of the Titan, now dispersed across a wide area of space. We've established a quarantine zone around the debris field. Remote probes indicate no signs of regeneration, but we're taking no chances. Voss then presented her preliminary findings. The samples we recovered are extraordinary. The crystalline structures contain computational capabilities far beyond our current technology, operating on quantum principles we barely understand. Weapons applications, Hart asked directly, cutting to what he knew Starfleet really wanted to know. Voss hesitated. Potentially, yes. The Titan's ability to disrupt our systems with targeted energy pulses could be adapted for offensive purposes. Its self-repairing hull composition has obvious defensive applications. And my recommendation is that we pursue none of it, Hart stated firmly. That entity wasn't just a biological curiosity. Commander, it was intelligent, adaptive, and incredibly dangerous. Weaponizing any part of it creates unacceptable risks. Morgan studied him thoughtfully. That decision isn't yours to make. Major, Starfleet Command will determine how this research proceeds. Then my formal report will include my strongest possible warning against it, Hart replied, his tone leaving no room for compromise. I've seen what happens when we meddle with void technology. The Centauri colonies were just the beginning. The debriefing continued for hours, each survivor providing their perspective on the encounter. Technical details were analyzed, timelines established, and lessons documented. Throughout it all, Hart remained resolute in his position that the Titan technology should be studied only for defensive purposes, never weaponized. When finally dismissed, Hart found himself alone in the station's observation lounge, staring out at the stars. The void between them seemed darker now, knowing what lurked in its depths. You did what was necessary. Voss's voice came from behind him. No one faults you for that. Hart didn't turn. I ripped apart a sentient being with my bare hands. Doctor, the fact that it was trying to kill us doesn't change that. It would have destroyed the station, possibly spread further. Your actions saved countless lives. At what cost? Hart finally turned to face her. We go out there claiming to be explorers, scientists, diplomats, but when threatened, we revert to our most primitive instincts. Tear, rend, destroy. Voss moved to stand beside him at the viewport. That's not fair. We attempted communication. We tried to study it peacefully. The Titan attacked first. Did it. We invaded its body, cut pieces from it, planted explosives inside it. From its perspective, we were the aggressors. You can't apply human ethics to something so alien. Hart looked down at the faint, luminescent scars on his arm. When I was connected to it, I felt, not thoughts exactly, but impressions. It was ancient. Doctor, far older than humanity, and it had encountered others like us before. What do you mean? Species that sought to use it, to weaponize it. That's why it reacted as it did. It recognized a pattern it had experienced before. Voss considered this. If that's true, it makes our research even more important. Understanding these entities could help prevent future conflicts. Or ensure them, Hart countered. Starfleet won't be satisfied with defensive applications. The pressure to develop weapons will be enormous. especially with the Orion Consortium expanding its territory. So, what do you suggest? Abandon all research? Pretend these beings don't exist? Hart shook his head. No, but we need to approach with respect, not opportunism. Study without exploitation, and most importantly, recognize that our understanding is fundamentally limited by our nature. He turned from the viewport. I've requested a transfer back to active duty. Starfleet approved it this morning. Running away from the consequences? Voss challenged. Facing them, Hart corrected. I don't belong in a lab, Doctor. Out there, on the frontier. I can at least try to prevent first contact scenarios from becoming last contact catastrophes. Voss nodded slowly. The samples we recovered. They're being transferred to Starfleet Research Division tomorrow. I've been offered the lead position on the analysis team. Will you take it? Someone needs to ensure the research is conducted responsibly, she replied. After what I witnessed, I can't trust that to someone else. Hart almost smiled. Then perhaps there's hope after all. 1 week later, Hart stood in the shuttle bay once more, a small duffel containing his possessions slung over his shoulder. The scars on his arm had faded further, but remained visible, a permanent reminder of his encounter with the void. Commander Morgan approached as he waited for his transport. Your new assignment came through. The Intrepid is conducting survey operations near the Perseus Void anomaly. Another void zone, Hart observed. Starfleet isn't wasting any time putting my experience to use. They want someone who knows what to look for, Morgan replied, and how to respond if necessary. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Morgan studied him for a moment. The official record will show that the Titan was destroyed by the Prometheus quantum drive detonation. Your direct intervention has been classified. But the rumors will spread anyway, Hart concluded. Starfleet scientists watched in horror as a human ripped apart a void Titan by hand. Makes for a good story. Is that how you want to be remembered? Hart considered the question as his transport vessel announced final boarding. No, he finally answered. But perhaps it will serve as a warning. There are lines we shouldn't cross, Commander. Not because we can't, but because we shouldn't. A philosophical soldier, Morgan observed with mild surprise. There aren't many of those left in Starfleet. Perhaps there should be more, Hart replied, shouldering his bag. The void is watching us, Commander, and it's learning from every encounter. As his transport departed EOS 9, Hart watched the research station recede into the distance. Somewhere in its laboratories, the remnants of the Titan were being analyzed, their secrets extracted for humanity's benefit, or peril. He looked down at his scarred arm, the faint luminescence visible even through his uniform sleeve. The connection had been severed, the contamination purged, but something remained, a reminder of the price of knowledge and the responsibility it carried. The vast emptiness of space stretched before him, countless stars marking the boundaries of explored territory. Beyond them lay the void zones, ancient and mysterious, home to entities humans could barely comprehend. Hart knew he would face them again. Next time, perhaps, humanity would be better prepared, not with more powerful weapons or advanced technology, but with greater wisdom and respect for the unknown. Until then, the void waited, patient and eternal. And in the darkness between stars, other Titans drifted, watching the small creatures that dared to challenge their domain.